Greetings, everyone. Dale Parrish, host COS today, along with co-host Mr. Ken Kashuba.
Howdy, Dale.
Hi, Ken. Folks, you have to pardon us. Ken and I have been arguing prior to the broadcast. So,
Arguing, yes.
no, we've been debating, I guess. Not
That's
not
better.
arguing.
That's better. Debate.
That's probably a better way of saying
Yeah,
it. Well, listen, folks, we've got a great lineup for you tonight. We're going to talk about media bias, and I'll tell you that's a hot topic, and we're going to be showing you two parts of a three-part interview that I did with a very, very interesting individual. Anyway, before we get to that, Ken, if you recall, a couple weeks ago on our broadcast, you and I touched on the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yes.
Remember?
Yep.
And you and I had some questions. We didn't know a whole lot about it, quite honestly. And you, I think, did some quick research on while we were on the air. So anyway, what I decided to do was I decided to look into the Nobel Peace Prize and what that's about, and to kind of educate myself and hopefully maybe educate some viewers. So I put together a little piece, and I'd like to play that for everyone. And then before we get into our scheduled interviews, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks, everyone. I've been aware all my life of the Nobel Peace Prize. I think we've all heard about that, but I really didn't know a great deal about it. So I decided to look into it, and I put together a little presentation here. I hope you find it informative. I certainly did when I put it together. So I learned a lot. So let's get right into it. Well, the Nobel Peace Prize was established by the 1895 will of Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. He left his fortune to fund annual prizes, not only for peace, but also in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, as well as peace. The Peace Prize has been awarded annually since 1901, except during major conflicts like World War II. Now, how are individuals nominated for this prize? Well, the nominations must be submitted by qualified individuals, including national politicians, university professors, international judges, and former laureates. Nominations open in September and close by January 31st of the award year. Okay. Requirements to be nominated. Candidates must be living and have made significant contributions to peace, such as conflict resolution, disarmament, or humanitarian efforts. The nomination must include then a detailed justification. Okay. What's the voting process? How does that work? Well, the Norwegian Nobel Committee, a 5-member body appointed by the Norwegian Parliament, reviews the nominations. They create a short list, then conduct investigations and vote to select the winner. A majority vote decides the winner. What's the timeline? How does this work? Well, as we mentioned, nominations close January 31st of the award year. The short list is formed by spring of that year. The winner is chosen in early October and announced shortly thereafter. The formal award ceremony takes place on December 10th in Oslo, Norway. What are the benefits to the winner? Now, I've heard different stories about what the benefits are, and I was aware that there was a monetary benefit, but I wasn't sure how much it was. Well, the Nobel Peace Prize comes with global recognition, obviously, a gold medal, a diploma, and a monetary award approximately equating $1 million. I wasn't aware of that. And of course, it often enhances the winner's influence and legacy. Obviously, that what a resume enhancement to be a Nobel Prize winner of any field. So you can imagine the influence that that has on a person's career. Okay. Now, as we know, Donald Trump has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Does he have a chance? Well, as I said, he's been nominated multiple times, as a matter of fact, particularly for his efforts in the Middle East peace agreements. Now, this nomination, current nomination, I'll just mention there's actually been a group of individuals that have submitted his name or submitted him as nomination. But the two that I want to mention are Representative Darrell Issa of California and Representative Claudia Tenney of New York. Both of those are two of our politicians here in the States that have submitted his name as a nominee. So while nomination is significant, winning requires consensus from the Nobel Committee in alignment with Nobel's peace criteria. So it remains a possibility, but obviously uncertain. And we've all, if you've been paying any attention, you've heard some reports that he's been highly favored in this, but we will see. Okay. And that, I hope that has provided you a little background on the Nobel Peace Prize and how it's done, how it's handled. So I hope you've enjoyed it. So thank you very much. And we'll see come probably about October when we will know who the winner is of the Nobel Peace Prize. Thank you.
That was very good, Dale.
Well, I think I learned a little bit from that process. So
yeah, I wasn't aware of all the awards. I mean, certainly, certainly not $1 million worth of cash, but there's a lot of other things that went with that make that quite a package. So
yeah. Yeah. But it's been a long time since I paid any attention to this, but I think I do recall something being said about $1 million back when Gore won it, I think, or was it Obama? I can't remember now which one it was.
Might have been. Well, it was probably Gore. If they had mentioned Obama, then he would have had to pay taxes on that. Yeah, what are you going to do? But I think the whole I agree. He's got to be favored. I mean, but again, if we're talking common sense, it wouldn't surprise me that, I mean, we're talking about, people that aren't from this country that are actually making the biggest decisions on that. And what do they think of him? I guess that's really what it comes down to.
That's what I'm concerned about. And the Trump derangement syndrome and
it's up in the air.
We'll see. We'll see. It would not surprise me though, if he's passed over, but we'll see. We'll see. All right. Okay. Well, let's get into then our part one of our interview with a gentleman from Ohio, Michael Mercier. I think I'm pronouncing his name right.
Mercier. Yep. Mercier.
It sounds like it looks like Mercer, but it's Mercier, I believe it is. Yeah, something like that.
Come in there, Mercier. Yeah.
Yeah. But we kind of we get into this early in the interview, so I don't want to repeat it everything. But this guy has he has spent over 30 years. This is a hobby to him, and he's just latched on to something very, very interesting. So let's get to this, and we'll I hope everyone enjoys this. This is part one. We're gonna a little later in the broadcast, we'll play part two, and then part three we're going to have to hold until next week. But we'll get two of the three parts in this evening. So let's go with Michael here. Here we go. All right. Greetings, everyone. Welcome. I want to introduce to you Mr. Mike Mercier.
Yep.
Am I saying it right, Mike?
Yeah, Mike Mercier.
Mercier. Yeah. I struggled with pronouncing his name correctly here. So hopefully we got it right. Mike, we're going to be talking about media bias today. Tell me how you got involved in this quickly. How has this become an interest to you?
It started when I was in my 20s. I became aware of how the media was affecting society, and then I got a graduate degree in business and focused a lot on that through my program. And then I went to work at a newspaper and a magazine, and then in book publishing. And it's just been I've just been continually studying the media since then. It's like a hobby, really. So I've gained a lot of insights over the last 30 or so years studying the media.
I just find that amazing that it's really become a hobby for you. And
it really has.
And you tell me you're not interested in sports. So
I say that as a joke, right? So I know, a lot of my friends watch football and baseball, and I don't spend any time watching sports other than a little tennis occasionally. But
okay.
So my point is that, I have a lot of free time because I don't do that. So.
Okay. Well, that's very interesting. Well, I was been so interested in doing this interview with you because I call it media bias, and I've said this to you leading up to our interview here. I've always been interested in it's your truth and my truth, and that dilemma, that point counterpoint there, and how our media has developed that. And I think this is right in line with what you're interested in, right?
Yes, and just to preface before we get into the details, I just want to tell the audience up front that what we're going to talk about and what the media is doing is really unconscionable, the way that they're dividing the public in the way that they do. It's extremely destructive. And it really needs to stop. So that's part of my hope here, is by explaining.
But it's so powerful, Michael, right?
It is. And it breaks families apart. It keeps people rabidly divided, and it needs to stop. So that's part of the point here. I feel like if I can illustrate for people what's happening, how they're doing this, then it could awaken some people and have some effect. So.
Well, I guess that's maybe a question for another time. But how do you stop it? How do we stop it? I guess.
Well, I view it as an information war. So the more people that awaken to it, I think I told you offline, Dale. I'm what I refer to myself as a media activist. So I've spent since about 1996 or 7. I've been actively reaching out to journalists, challenging them.
Yes.
On things that they say, and I mean frequently. And it used to be I used to be able to do it with NPR by phone, but then they shut the phones down after 2020 election.
Okay.
They did. You used to be able to call and transfer you could voice transfer to the journalists, and they talk to you.
Really?
Oh, it was amazing. You could actually have conversations with all the NPR journalists, and if not, you'd leave a voice message if you couldn't reach. I had them call me back.
Wow.
Many times.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyhow, that's one thing that people can do, is become sort of media activists and challenge these people, whether it's directly the way that I do or through creating their own videos, becoming their own independent podcasters and things like that. The more that they can be challenged, the better, I think.
So, so maybe what we're doing here with COS today is part of the solution then.
I feel, any opportunity I can find to share these insights, I think helps.
Yeah.
So
Just a little side note, Michael, when you say you started in 1996, we're talking almost 30 years ago. I can't believe that.
yeah, that's when I made my first phone call. I was so frustrated. I was at work and I had NPR news on at like 4 p.m. and Linda Wertheimer said something, and I was it was actually just it wasn't political. She was just rude. She was basically joking about a celebrity who was on their deathbed. And I was so angry. I called NPR and someone answered and I said, Linda Wertheimer, please. And they put me right through and she answered the phone. That's how it started.
Amazing. I
So,
can't believe we're talking 30 years ago here.
yeah.
My goodness. Where's the time gone? Okay. Michael, let's you got a PowerPoint here. Let's bring it up and let's get started and have you kind of lay the groundwork here as to how the news media is arranged in your mind here. So
Right. So the point I want to make here, the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that we talk about it's commonly known that we're a quote polarized society, right? We're polarized.
right.
And when people talk about this, they make it sound like it's the citizens' fault, right? It's the individual citizens' fault that we're polarized, and we just can't get along, right? We just disagree, and we need to be nicer to each other.
We
And
agree to disagree, huh?
right. So the point I'm making here is that it's not the citizens' fault. It's the fault of the news media. The news media have polarized themselves, right? And basically the reason we as citizens are polarized is we tend to take in news, right, from one of the poles.
That's right.
And we tend to not expose ourselves to the news from the other poles. Okay. And as a result, they realize this, so they distort their reporting. And that's what polarizes the public. We're placed in different realities. What I'm trying to illustrate here with this chart is the lines along which we're polarized. So you can see if you look left, right, there's a polarization between the liberal and conservative news outlets. So that's probably the type of polarization that people are most familiar with, right?
Yes.
So, but there's another axis of polarization that I've discovered, and that's the vertical one between corporate mainstream media at the top and independent citizen journalists or media at the bottom. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So there are two dimensions along which we're polarized. So if we go back to the horizontal polarization, the liberal and conservative, if you look at the top, the corporate liberal and corporate conservative, you can see the outlets I've listed there: CNN, MSNBC, ABC,
Right.
CBS, NPR, The Atlantic, etc. Right. On the right, we have Fox, Newsmax, Wall Street Journal, iHeartRadio, Sean Hannity show, for example. Right.
And I'm very into Newsmax now. There's no doubt about that.
Right. So these are sort of like this is the mainstream polarization. If you take in news from the liberal side mainstream
Right.
versus the right side mainstream, you're going to basically be in a different universe than the other people, right?
Right. That's right.
You're literally placed in a different universe. You have a different perspective on reality, right?
That's right.
And that's one of the sources of polarization. Now, what we're going to get to in a little bit is, what's that reality based upon? So we'll talk about that in a minute, right?
Okay.
How do they place us in these different realities? What are the mechanisms they use in terms of information management and control?
All right.
But if we look at the bottom, we've got the independent and citizen journalists, right? These are like podcasters or people who have independent networks. Like Steve Bannon has his own on the right.
Yes.
He's an independent conservative talk show host. He's probably the most influential when it comes to the MAGA viewpoint, right?
Okay.
And he's part of this independent network called America's Voice or Real America's Voice. So there's a network. So his podcast airs for 4 hours a day through Rumble, but also through this network called Real America's Voice. Um, the Gateway Pundit is an example. I think that's one of the most read conservative independent outlets, right? Along with Breitbart. Those two are really popular, right?
Okay.
National Pulse is another example. John Solomon, he's an independent journalist. On the left, you've got people like the Young Turks. Glenn Greenwald came from the left, but because he's so objective, he's sort of, I'd put him in the center, possibly moving to the right, but he's really in the
I know
center.
Glenn Beck used to feature him a lot, didn't he?
Yeah, but he started off as like a liberal, you know.
I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore. I thought he came from the Young Turks. These Young Turks were uber liberal, but Jimmy Dore is an example of someone, I think, by going independent, he's being more balanced in his reporting, and he's almost like a conservative now, right?
Okay.
So this is the basic polarization, and what you're going to see is, just as we see in the mainstream media, like this break between liberal and conservative, there's also a polarization between corporate mainstream and independent and citizen. And I'll give you one example to illustrate this point. That is the reporting on COVID, right?
Yes. Yes.
You'll see that basically when it comes to reporting on COVID, on the vaccines, on treatments like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, basically the corporate mainstream media, the left and right, they kind of merged, and they reported the same information. That's an example of where they were both aligned. And if you watched CNN versus Fox, you're probably going to see most of the same information. On they wouldn't report on the vaccine injuries. They wouldn't say anything positive about ivermectin, right? So they sort of united. But the polarization came in because the independent media and the citizen journalists were fully reporting on people who were vaccine injured.
Okay.
And they would have, for example, or on looking at the data, the aggregate data that showed vaccine injuries, like from the VAERS database, right? So there was an example there was a Yale professor, Yale, right? Yale. Yeah. Harvey Risch, I believe his name was. It's been a few years, but he was like I don't know if he was an immunologist or public health specialist, but he was like an MD, PhD, I believe. And so he's at Yale. He was completely censored by the mainstream media, right? Dr. Robert Malone, who was the founder of mRNA vaccines, he spoke out against those vaccines as being dangerous. He was completely deplatformed and censored. They took down his Wikipedia page. Why would you take down a man's Wikipedia page? He fought them, and it was eventually restored. But why would you remove the guy that founded mRNA vaccine technology? So I hope that's clear. I don't want to take too long on this, but that's the basic idea. You'll see polarization along both dimensions, either liberal and conservative.
That's a very, very. I think that's a very interesting insight. I like that. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on. If I can get to it here. Okay.
Now, what I want to explain here, I want to illustrate how the device or the techniques that they're using to polarize us, okay? And what I've laid out here it's a simple flow chart showing the normal news reporting process, okay? So if you look at the left box, it starts off with a journalist, and what they do, the next box to the right, is they gather facts. And this is what's supposed to happen, right? Given the facts they're given, they aggregate the facts and they form what you'd call a news narrative, the storyline for a given story. They embody that narrative. Oops.
I jumped to. I'm sorry about that.
That's all right. They embody that narrative in a report, right? That's the next one. And that report, it depends on what type of news channel they work in. It could be a TV report, a radio report, a website, an app, could be print, literal print, or social media report, right? But they generate a report and they put it out and it reaches a citizen, right? So the key point I want you to see here is they gather facts and then they form a narrative. That's the normal sequencing of this process. Now, if you go to the next slide,
Okay.
What's happening today, given the polarization they've created, what they're doing is they're reversing those two steps in this process. So they're taking the narrative step and moving it up in the process. So they're forming a narrative first based upon their political viewpoint and bias and how they want to
Okay, now that's very important. You're saying they formulate the narrative based on their political bias.
Yes.
What you're saying.
Yep.
Interesting.
Right. So if a new piece of news, for example, is going to hurt Joe Biden, right? They form a narrative, right? So this shows the reversal of that process. They form the narrative first.
Whoops, sorry about that.
That's okay. Right. You get to go ahead. One more. That's fine if you go to the next one.
Go to the next one? Okay.
Yeah. So they form the narrative first, and then what they're doing is they're selecting the facts that will support the narrative. So this is where the censorship comes in. They exclude facts that don't support the narrative they want to get out, right? They only include the facts that support it. That's censorship, right? What we found is they also lie. They fabricate facts. They distort facts. There's this whole set of things that they do with facts because they need the facts to support the narrative they're putting out, right?
Okay.
So they're not going to give us the facts and then have the narrative follow from the facts. They're going to form the narrative and then selectively form a list of facts that support the narrative, right? So if you can go to the next slide. You go to the next slide.
Well, I tell you what, Michael, we're I can't believe it. We're getting in close to the our time limit here.
Okay.
This might be a good point to break off here. Will you come back and finish this up shortly here?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, folks. I'm going to sign off here, and thank you very much, Michael. And we will be back with you very shortly, and we'll take in segment 2. So thank you very much.
Likewise, thank you.
Very interesting so far.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and it describes it to a T.
Yeah, I think it's a great insight. Remember the word facts. Remember that word, facts.
Yep.
And because that is, as we go on in this, that's going to be a key point, and that's where it should start. I'm getting ahead of the game here, but
and I don't know whether you cover this further on down the line, but I'd be curious to find out what his perspective is on the fact checkers. That became such a big thing, you know. Oh, I ran it through the fact checker, and you're wrong. It's like,
I think he addresses that, and I even quizzed him on the use of AI.
Okay.
And he has some very good insights into that too. Anyway, we're getting ahead of the game here, but
it's easy to do.
Ken, I think this is so interesting. I think we should be thinking about how we can do more with him. And I don't know what that looks like right now. Maybe I shouldn't have even said this, but because I think this is such an important concept and such an important thing that goes on in our country. I mean, I'm sure if you're like me, you struggle all the time with this concept. It's, well, your truth or my truth, which is right, which is true, which is the truth, what's the truth. So,
well, I think we might even try and find somebody who can come in and talk about the neurological effects of media itself. I think there's a complete study on how much time kids spend on screens and everything else, and you start adding up how the brain can be manipulated and how people get manipulated, and I think it plays a part of this. So maybe there's some additional experts we can bring in to mix along with Michael. But I'll let you go ahead from here.
That's a good point. How does this get taught to young kids? How is this taught? Is it taught in our education system anyway? This is it's a part of critical thinking, it seems to me. So anyway, see, it really strikes up a lot of conversation, doesn't it?
You brought up a good point there. Critical thinking. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, we had a course that revolved around a book called. Let's see, I'm going to go blank on what it was called now. Opposite viewpoints, I think is what it's called. Mm-hmm. It's a whole series of books talking about opposite viewpoints, and it would present both sides of the story, and then you had to form your opinion from those two sides. It was really a great series, and that helps critical thinking, which I think we lack so much of today.
Remember the word facts. Remember the word facts.
Will do.
Okay. All right. Well, Ken, why don't you take a couple minutes here? Tell us about that QR code up there.
QR code up there. Yeah, that's the fact about the QR code is it is basically just a QR code which asks you to go ahead and put in your name and email address and say, I support what you guys are doing. Support COS. I support what you guys are bringing to the table every Monday night. That's all it is. We're not going to ask you for money. We're not going to take any other information other than your name and your email address. And we're going to allow you to jump onto a platform where people, other like-minded supporters, join in and get some contributor information. Things that we've done. We've had a lot of contributor segments that have been done over the years. And we highlight them there and allow you to go back and look at the very beginning to where they are now. So it's just a nice, informative, and a nice place to be able to gather and chat.
All right. Good deal. And you can take your phone and scan that QR code right on the screen there, right?
Even if you're viewing this by recording, just go ahead and hit that with your smartphone and
cool.
And as they say in somewhere in TV land, that's a fact, Jack.
I've really got this word fact embedded in your mind tonight, don't I?
Now that already you've talked about it enough. You've got me trained already. Yeah, fact.
Got you on already. Okay. Well, listen. Let's take a look at another Dave's Daily Dose from our friend up in Minnesota, David Punt. And he likes to send us these little segments that he does on his radio program. So this one, he's talking about CBS and what's going on at CBS. So hopefully find this interesting. So let's take a listen to this and we'll be right back.
We may now look along the garden path for the imaginary body of Wendy McMahon. Wendy used to be the president of CBS News and Stations and CBS Media Ventures. McMahon said, "It's become clear that the company and I do not agree on the path forward," said Wendy as she cleared out her desk. "But that may be the only thing clear to her or the rest of us." This is Dave's Daily Dose on Broken Road Radio. I'm David Allen Punt. CBS and 60 Minutes continued to insist in public statements that there was nothing wrong, nasty, evil, shaky, sneaky, underhanded, or even an accident when two stories appeared promoting a Kamala Harris special in the final days before last fall's election. The promo on Face the Nation featured a question from Bill Whitaker and a sort of answer from, at the time, Ms. Heartbeat Away. Bill's question made a second appearance the next night on 60 Minutes, but Kamala's answer was different. It still didn't make a lick of sense, but it was different. Trump sued CBS for $10 billion, later cranked it up to $20 billion. Meanwhile, the head of the Federal Communications Commission, Brendan Carr, took an interest. A conservative group filed a complaint with the FCC suggesting news distortion, an award 60 Minutes doesn't have yet. CBS says the charge is completely without merit. There's nothing there. It's all fake news from Trump and the FCC. But 60 Minutes exec Bill Owens hit the bricks last month, and now Wendy's out of work. Absolutely, there is a big money merger in the works between Paramount Global and Skydance, the guy with the money. So what's the big deal about a little TV fibbing? And who else will find their way out CBS's front door? Will our friend Scotty Pelley get a new gig at CNN? Who knows? Somebody does, but they're not talking. This is more entertaining than the entire Thursday night TV rundown, including the Kathy Baker Matlock redo. Looking forward to see who's left when the dust settles. I'm David Allen Punt.
Another good one from Dave, that's for sure.
I think that isn't that suit up to like 25 million now? Isn't that what he's trying to get on this?
Yeah, I think it's reached 25. Yeah.
Plus an on-air apology, I think.
Yeah.
He's demanding.
We might see blood before we see that, but yeah.
Yes. Very interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to part 2 of my interview with Michael, and hopefully I think I got a little better on handling the PowerPoint slides, but I'm not positive. I can't remember if I did or not. But
you seem to let your fingers seem to take control there for a while.
Yes. So let's go with part 2 here. All right. Well, everyone, we're back here again with Michael Mercier, and to continue talking about media bias. And Michael, let me bring up where we left off. Okay, you had showed us how the journalists now were creating the narrative first and then developing the facts, right?
Right. That's happening. Yeah.
And that's based on basically their political viewpoint.
Right. I want to be clear. Other people have explained this too. I mean, this has become in the last few years a common, refrain. I think probably more so on the right, but they talk about how the narrative, dictates the facts. So this was an original insight on my part, but other people have seen this too.
All right.
So I think this has become sort of a common view of what's going on.
Okay.
But if you want to go to the next slide, this was Obama. I actually found this when I was doing some research on this for the talk that I had developed here with the PowerPoints. I found this quote. This was an interview Obama did with the East.
I remember him saying this. I can remember.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do recall this. Yes.
Yeah. So, and this is why I want to present it. So he said, the information everyone receives is fractured and people form facts around their opinions rather than their opinions around facts. So Obama was acknowledging this process. He knows what's going on. He knows that this has been reversed. But what I'm doing in this slide, you can go to the next slide, is I'm rewriting Obama's quote because Obama is putting the onus on the citizen. He says, people, right? People are doing this, right?
Right.
The problem is not that the people are doing this. The problem is the journalists are doing this. That's the problem, right? So society isn't this way because we're all bad actors and we don't understand this. The individual uninformed citizens they're not good at analyzing information, etc. This is intentionally being done by the news outlets, right? So I rewrote his quote. I say the information everyone receives is fractured because journalists form facts around their narratives rather than their narratives around facts.
Okay.
So that's what I was illustrating with that flow chart.
All right.
So this is to validate, what I was saying. Obama basically said the same thing. Okay. So
all right.
So what I'm trying to show here is they're basically acting as propagandists. That's what the news outlets are doing because they're manipulating facts. They're developing narratives and then creating facts to support the narratives. If you look at the left side here, fact-related propaganda techniques. So the point I'm making here with this list is these are the things that if you're a news outlet and you want to put out a narrative, okay, because you want to influence people, not because you want to represent and report a story accurately and objectively, but because you want to influence people, right? You have to have a fact set that supports that narrative. So you are necessarily going to have to distort your fact set. You're going to have to manipulate your fact set to maintain the narrative. These are the things they do to manipulate the fact set. They fabricate facts, they censor facts, they obfuscate, they distort facts, they exaggerate. So these are all techniques and we're all very familiar with the censorship part, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And we had validation of that. I mean, what we had validation of during the COVID and the 2020 election, the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop,
Right.
was that the government was working with the tech companies, and we never really got proof that they were working with the media companies, not explicit proof, but it's very obvious that they were. But we had Elvis Chang, who was an FBI agent. He was sued, and his emails were released through that suit. And we knew that beginning in August of 2020, he had a team of people flying to Silicon Valley every Monday to meet with the tech companies so they could prepare them to basically lie about the laptop being Russian disinformation. That started in August, like two to 3 months before the election, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's an example of mass censorship driven by a government agency, right? Through big tech, and the stories were exactly the same in the media. So we never saw actual proof that they were doing this with the media, but I don't know how they couldn't be, because the media were basically echoing what was being said by the tech companies.
Yeah.
On the right, what I'm showing is these are other techniques that involve withholding facts, so like censoring facts, exaggerating facts, obfuscating facts, distorting facts, and making up facts. So these are techniques they use using the set of facts to focus on a person, target a person. So the top one there, demonizing versus idealizing. This is a common technique that's used, and a good example would be Robert F. Kennedy Jr. When he announced he was running for president. I can't say who this is, but I emailed a journalist that I know, and immediately, I think that day, and I said, what's going to happen is you guys are basically going to demonize him, and as a I'm just sorry. Sorry about that, spring allergies. But you guys are basically going to demonize him as being a and you're going to marginalize him as being an anti-vaxxer, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to reduce his identity, his complete identity as a candidate, to this vax issue, and demonize him. And if you look at an example of idealizing someone would be Anthony Fauci during COVID.
Yes. Yes.
He was, people use the term he was sainted, right? Saint Fauci. That's, you idealize someone if you want to convince the public not to question them in any way.
Michael, do you think journalists are trained in any of these?
No, I don't. If you go to like the Columbia School of Journalism or the Medill School, I don't think they are. I don't know how they could be. It would be so dishonest.
It would seem to me like
But they learn this. I mean, let me
on the job learning taking place there, right?
Yeah. So you'll see that with you can see this sort of polarization with these techniques when it comes to the reporting on the illegal immigration. There's no balanced reporting, really. So you see on the right, what they'll do is they'll sort of idealize or humanize people who are victims of crimes, committed by illegal immigrants.
Uh-huh.
Right. So a great example would be the people whose daughters are murdered, right, by illegal immigrants. You will rarely to never see humanizing stories on the right about individual immigrants that are here illegally, right? Um, so that's a technique the right uses. They'll never take sympathy with an illegal immigrant, really,
Right. Exactly.
right? On the left, they're ignoring the people who are murdered, who are victims of illegal immigrants, right? And they're doing stories that humanize and idealize the immigrants,
Exactly.
right? So
That's right.
so this past week, I heard a story where they were focusing on someone who was deported, and she had to leave her infant daughter, 3-year-old daughter or something behind, and you could hear the daughter crying and the mother crying, and it was clearly designed to create sympathy and to humanize the illegal immigrants, but they will never report on the victims of crimes and humanize those people. So I'm being balanced here. You see it on both sides. You're not getting balanced, objective reporting.
That's right.
And
That's
these are techniques they use. And let me say it this way: once you know these techniques and understand them, you can see it instantly when it's happening, and you can actually predict, like I did with RFK Jr., that it's going to happen. You know that it's going to be unacceptable to the left that he be a candidate, and they're going to have to take him down. And that's how they do it.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. Very good. Very interesting. Okay. Let's move on here. Okay. Well,
sorry. The point I'm making here is that I just want a little more insight about these narratives that they construct. Right. What they do is they got to get the narrative out early. You'll see that this is. They try to get, if a news story hits and it goes against what they want, they form a narrative, their preferred narrative, and they get it out really early, and they amplify it. So when I say amplify it, I mean they'll repeat it all day long, right? A certain network will repeat it all day long, but then the whole ecosystem of liberal or conservative networks or outlets will run with it and repeat it. So you've got this sort of cacophony, right? Or this, this echo chamber, say it that way, of outlets. This whole, you're like the listener is sort of, wherever they turn to get liberal or conservative news, they're going to hear the same narrative over and over again. It becomes ossified. What ends up happening is the audience internalizes it. And it's very hard to go against it once it's internalized by the audience. They know they've got them. So that's what they do. That before they can hear any contradictory information, they form the narrative, get it out quickly, amplify it, and they know that the audience is very likely to internalize it, and it can't be challenged after that. And an example could be, Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. We know the FBI was preparing big tech for 2 months to say that, right?
okay. Yeah.
And they got it out. They wanted them to get it out immediately. That was the idea. Or January 6th was framed as a literal coup. It was a planned coup. They didn't have guns, right? They're all like preppers, but they forgot to bring their guns, and it was a planned coup. It was literally an attempt to take over the government.
Right.
So that's a great example. That narrative became ossified, and it's hard to convince anyone on the left that it's not true, that it was a attempted coup d'etat.
Yeah. I think anyone that is watching the news a lot can relate to this, and I think I've seen this. It's like getting the memo out to all the news outlets. That you want to say this, you want to say it in this way, you want to use these terms. It's like someone has put out a memo to everybody.
Right.
You see it very easily. Yep.
On the bottom there, excuse me. What I'm trying to illustrate there is that these are examples of individuals or groups that are beating the mainstream news media narrative because they've gotten such large audiences, right? So Joe Rogan is an example. Like he had this, the mainstream news media wouldn't interview Dr. Malone, the founder of mRNA vaccine technology, who spoke out against the vaccines as being too dangerous and risky, right? But Joe Rogan, because he has such a massive audience, Joe Rogan has Dr. Malone on his show, and he's going to get around.
Yeah.
He's going to get around the mainstream news, and it drives them crazy. They can't stand it. That's why they started to demonize Joe Rogan, right? Or in Canada, remember the truckers protest?
Yes. Yes.
There was an independent news outlet. I'm forgetting the name of it. Rebel News, I think.
Okay.
That followed that thing, and they got the word. They sort of were able to bypass the CBC, Canadian Broadcast Corporation, and the American mainstream news, right? This is an independent Canadian network, Rebel News, and they embedded people with the truckers. Like they had journalists riding with the truckers,
Okay.
reporting live.
Yeah.
So reporting from the protests and showing what was really going on. So that's another example, is if people can, the independent media can basically, if enough people become independent journalists and they can build up their own independent networks, they can really challenge the mainstream media. And I feel those are two examples of independent outlets that have.
Good. Good. Understand. Okay.
So something I said at the beginning was it's really unconscionable what they're doing. And
Well,
this is, oops,
sorry.
that's all right. The effect of all this is it deprives us of a total set of facts as individuals, as citizens, right? It divides us into these mutually exclusive realities. And this ends up making political dialogue impossible. We can't have a dialogue, right? Because we end up debating the facts. So we can't talk about policy solutions because we can't agree on the facts. So every debate we have with someone on the other side breaks down immediately because we have different facts and we can't agree on what's the reality of the situation, right? This is what makes this so destructive. The media is so destructive in doing this, I feel. And the point 4 there is that this ends up because we end up having these rabid arguments about, what are the facts around this certain issue, right, that we're discussing. It antagonizes us from friends, family, and coworkers, and from our employers even, right? You had like employers taking positions over the last 5, 6, 7 years, right? And people, it wasn't acceptable to hold certain views about things. People got fired in some cases.
That's right. That's right.
So it's what the media has done has been extremely destructive in terms of dividing us. It's so insidious that it's unacceptable. It really is unacceptable, and it has to be stopped.
I tell you, you just refreshed my memory on the people that lost their jobs during that COVID thing, and a lot of that could be tied back to this narrative that was put out there, and how like we said, how destructive this is.
Right. Look at Naomi Wolf is a great example. She wrote she's a feminist, right?
Yeah.
Naomi Wolf. She wrote that book, The Beauty Myth. She was a consultant to the cultural consultant to the Clinton administration, right?
Uh-huh.
She started speaking out against the COVID lockdowns and the vaccines because she was getting reports from people through social media who were getting seriously injured by those vaccines. So she just started speaking out about it. She was deplatformed and kicked off social media and canceled by the demonized by the mainstream media, the liberal media. She's no longer accepted by the liberal media. She was like lauded and
Wow.
held up for being this major feminist, and now she's she's nothing to them because she spoke out against the vaccines. So she started going on conservative media because they'd at least give her a voice, right? She really did.
Yeah. All right, Michael, let's move on here. We're closing in on the end of another segment here. So,
Just quickly with this, I want, it's another Obama quote, but he says the exact same thing. And the point I'm making is, like, these people know what they're doing. Obama knows this is going on. He said, we live in such a polarized time. If you watch Fox News, you're in one reality. If you read the New York Times, you're in a different reality. And if you're at BuzzFeed, you're someplace else. It's challenging to have a common conversation. Well, it's intentional, Barack.
that's right. Yes.
There's no mystery here. It's not an accident. It's not like it's we the less than bright public, right? We just can't get along, or we can't. It's being intentionally done to us, right? And that's the problem. This is intentional.
Yes.
So,
okay, Michael, let's wrap it up here on this segment, and we'll pick up again here at this very point, moving on, if that's okay with you.
sure, it's fine.
And we'll be looking forward to bringing you back for the next segment. So hang tight.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. It's all very good stuff.
It's all really good stuff, and I can't wait to present to you part 3, the final part. It's really he kind of puts it all together as to how individually how we overcome this, but or at least it sounds good on paper. I'll say that. Okay. But yeah, it's been very, very interesting. Very interesting. All right. Well, Ken, we every week we like to tune in to national and see how they see things happening with COS across the country. So let's take a bit here and look at COS Now, which is generated weekly by our national group. So here's the latest.
Coming up on COS Now, Michael Ferris gives a tour de force performance at a public hearing in Ohio, a live event featuring the Texas team, and an exciting new opportunity for young patriots. All that and more on this week's episode of COS Now.
What do we want? When do we want it?
Last Tuesday, COS co-founder and constitutional attorney Michael Ferris gave a show-stopping performance before the Ohio House Government Oversight Committee. In the proponent-only hearing, committee members asked questions about HJR 2 and House Bill 67, and Ferris was at the top of his game in advocating for the constitutional solution as big as the problem.
Look at our Constitution. We have state after state that says we want to change our Constitution, that our adversaries like China and others like Russia look at us and they say, look at the chaos in the United States.
You want to know how China can get to us? The way China can get to us is through these executive agreement treaties. And there's 198 of them coming down your throat every year. Your ideas of how it might work, frankly, is conjecture and fanciful. What I'm talking about is real and happens 198 times a year. You want to stop this? You pass HJR 2 and we change the treaty provisions of the Constitution to make it absolutely explicit that there's no such things as executive agreements.
Representative Gross also clashed with local COS supporters who ably defended the cause.
The nuclear option of an Article 5 convention. Why do you believe that Congress will then all of a sudden obey the Constitution?
Well, historically speaking, we do follow amendments when they are passed. What amendment are we not following right now, Rep. Gross? Through the chair to Rep. Gross.
I'm not going to answer that right now.
Oh, okay. It was rhetorical. It was a rhetorical question.
Be sure to follow the COS blog for future updates regarding our march to the finish line in the Buckeye States. Last month, Dr. Ferris also appeared at a Capitol rally in New Jersey with COS activists.
What's going on with Musk and with Doge is a disruption that is long overdue. And, We are trying to do that same thing, structurally and permanently. That's what this is about. Requiring supermajority votes for tax increases, requiring supermajority votes for spending increases, requiring supermajority votes to ever go outside of a balanced budget, some form of term limits, not just on federal elected officials, but on people like Dr. Fauci.
Meanwhile, COS President Mark Meckler appeared on Newsmax TV to comment on current events and spread the word about Article 5.
Joining me now to discuss more is the president of the Convention of the States, Mark Meckler. Mark, thank you for joining the...
If you go to his Domestic Policy Council in the White House, and I've been there, they say they are the office of promises kept. And that's what Donald Trump is doing. He's stepping up for the American people domestically, economically, internationally.
And now for the final 5. Number 1, on Saturday, the season 1 finale of My Story Of series premiered. Here's a preview of that short film. But Arizona stands out as an exemplar of the excellence, competence, and commitment of those pushing for an Article 5 convention. Despite knowing COS had the votes to pass, one man refused to even bring it up for a vote in the Senate.
He blocked it.
His name was
Andy Biggs. His name was Andy Biggs.
Senate President Andy Biggs, who had ties to JBS, a leading COS opposition group, repeatedly and unilaterally blocked our progress in the state legislature. You can check out the full story of Arizona on Convention of States YouTube or Rumble. Number 2, Convention of States is now accepting applications for our Emerging Leaders Internship Program. Here's what the outgoing class had to say about the 2024 to 2025 internship.
The mentorship has been absolutely exceptional.
I've taken it to heart and I've learned so much about what it means to be a faithful, committed citizen to the country.
If I were to describe the program in one word, I would say growth. You're going to grow, you're going to be challenged.
It has definitely pushed me to go far beyond what I was initially comfortable with, always pushing me outside of my comfort zone.
It's a great experience that I highly recommend.
It's been a life-changing experience.
Check out cosinternship.com to learn more. Number 3, this month's COS at Home will be a Texas Victory Roundtable with special guests that include Representative Cody Vasut and Jose Melendez of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. That program goes live June 4th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at conventionofstates.com/at-home. Number 4, the Colorado team continues to spread the word at the Great Guns Sporting, where they collected dozens of petitions encouraging state legislators to vote yes for COS. And number 5, here are some of my favorite recent photos sent in from COS patriots across the country. What was your favorite piece of news from this week's recap? Have you watched the season 1 finale of The Story Of yet? Let me know in the comments section below, and I'll see you next week on COS Now.
Well, I don't know if you all recognized, but in that Ohio segment, the Ohio resident that was challenging the representative, that's our own Diana Tellis.
That's right. Made a good point.
Yeah. Yep.
Little rhetorical combination here that the congressperson just said, I'm not going to answer that.
Right. So I know, of course, Ohio's continuing to struggle trying to become a pass state. Yep. We're so close in some of these states, so close. So looking for number 20. Well, along those lines, I'm going to try and make it a tradition here at the beginning of every month to once again remind everyone that we're trying to approach things on COS today from the COS, the Convention of States perspective. And I thought I would play that again this evening. And like I said, I want to make sure people remember that we're trying to approach our delivery of news and significant items in our country from the COS perspective, from our perspective. So I wanted to make sure everyone understands what that's about. So let me play this again here. Greetings, everyone. This is Dale Parrish, COS Today host. I've been wanting to take a little time to make it clear to our viewers how we on COS Today, how we approach national issues that we discuss on our live stream. So I call it the COS perspective. So I want to take a little time and tell you and explain to you what our COS perspective is. Now, let me bring up a little PowerPoint that I've got prepared for us. The COS perspective, okay? Now, there are two basic factors involved in forming our perspective. Number one is the resolution that we propose in Convention of States for holding a Convention of States. This is a resolution that we need to get 34 states to pass and sign on to in order to call for the convention. Right now, we're at 19 states. The second component of the COS perspective is what I call the COS Convention of States core values, and I'll get into those very soon. But here, let's just take the COS resolution at this point in time. And our resolution calls for the imposition of fiscal restraints. Now, we're talking about in a Convention of States where we would propose amendments, not pass amendments, but propose amendments pertaining to these three areas of the resolution. And the first one is to impose fiscal restraints. Obviously, as we all know, the national debt is approaching 37 trillion, out of hand. So there need to be fiscal restraints imposed, and we want to propose amendments to the Constitution that would deal with fiscal restraints. The second part of we call these pillars of our resolution. So the second one is to limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. Now, this covers a wide area. Basically, we're looking at reining in federal overreach and to then restore the power and ability and rights of the states. And the third part, the third pillar of our resolution deals with term limits. That's term limits for Congress as well as other federal officials. So that takes in a wide range of individuals and positions in our federal government. So that's the first leg, the first component of the COS perspective. The second component that I mentioned to you was our core values for Convention of States as an organization. And the first one, to preserve constitutional originalism. And this is basically to uphold the meaning and intent of the Constitution as it was formed. The second core value, foster responsible self-governance. Now, this is very, very important. This is where we encourage citizens to take responsibility for their communities and government. In other words, get involved. Okay? Cultivate servant leaders. Promote leaders who serve the people, not themselves. Be kind. Practice civility and respect in all interactions. Next, produce meaningful results. That means to focus on real, impactful changes rather than symbolic actions. And finally, to revere Judeo-Christian values. This is to acknowledge the foundational role that these values play in American heritage. So, as I said, the two components of the COS perspective would be the three pillars in our resolution and these 6 core values of our organization, Convention of States. So basically, to wrap it all up, the COS Today mission then is to address issues from the Convention of States constitutional perspective. So this is what we try to do in Convention of States in COS Today. Address issues from the Convention of States constitutional perspective, and to promote, obviously, calling for a Convention of States utilizing Article 5 of our Constitution. But I hope this gives you a little better idea of what we're trying to accomplish here in Convention of States, in COS Today, and to kind of give you a better idea of how we approach issues in our country and in our nation as they're going on, and how we want to apply our perspective. So that's what I wanted to do today. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this is informative to you. Thank you very much.
Good to review.
All right. Yep. Okay. Well, we'll visit that from time to time, just to keep people abreast of what we're trying to do here. So, all right. Well, we pointed out our comms team member Diana Tellis appearing in the COS Now video. We now have a whole segment devoted to the interview that she held with a gentleman from Ohio, another podcaster from Ohio. I think his name is Mark Bakita. So anyway, this is Ken. Is this the final segment? Do you recall that?
Yeah, this is where she wraps it up. Yep.
Okay. So she sent us the whole interview. It was well over an hour, I think.
Yeah.
The whole interview, and we've kind of broken it down to different segments. So this one should be. I think this is part. Is it part 4, the fourth one, or the fifth one?
I think it's actually longer. I think we did a short one not too long ago. I think this is actually the 6th, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, is it really? Could be. All right.
I think, yeah.
Anyway, so let's go ahead and get this one done, and because Diana does a great job in this. She does a great job. So here we go.
You know, these are the kind of things that you know, it's very interesting to look at how Democrats, Republicans, Reds, Blues look at these kind of topics. Taking that to the next step, if a convention proposes amendments, what's the biggest hurdle in getting 38 states to ratify them?
Well, let me back up. If you don't mind, I'd like to talk about my theory on term limits, if that's okay, or unless you're worried about time. But I do have a thought on term limits, and I would like to hear what you have to say about it. So because we have legislators who talk about, pushing back a little bit on that issue, some of them that might even be not signing on to our resolution because of it. Now, Ohio doesn't have to vote for it in the end, and it may not pass. If legislatures don't like it, it won't pass anyway. But my theory on this is that what the terms in the House and the U.S. House and the Senate, on average, the average legislator stays in Washington, D.C. somewhere between 9 and 11 years. When I first read that, I thought, I'd been with COS a while, and I thought, well, that's not really all that long. What are we worried about if it's not that long? So the average legislator in the House is like 9 years. The average senator stays about 11. That's just averages. And that doesn't sound so nefarious. It's the career politicians that we want to affect. So out of one of our, we have simulated conventions, and out of one of those conventions, I saw a term limit amendment that had been passed out of this simulated convention that suggested a 24-year term limit. And that sounds a little ridiculous. That's an awful long time. However,
that's in total. total
It
federal.
would be total between the
elected
House
office.
and multiples of 6, right? But and it's it would be they could move from either chamber, but total of 24 years in Washington D.C. you're out, and that's still kind of silly. It's an awful long time. It isn't what the founders envisioned, but we are looking to like actually pass an amendment. So we would have to acknowledge that if the legislatures aren't that excited about term limits, if you go to 24, it might look a little more attractive to them and a little less concerning to them than 12 years. 12 years would be very, very short, honestly, if you consider the average, right? Actually, considering the average, it's not that short, but it would be more of a concern, I think, to the state legislatures to go with 12 years than 24. So 24 still allows us what it really allows us to do. We don't need to worry about the average legislator. They're only staying 9 to 11 years. We're worried about the career politicians who dig their heels in so hard and make so much money that they can't be moved. You're wheeling them into the Senate, like weekend at Bernie's. Okay, they don't know when to leave, and they're powerful, and you know their names, right? I don't even know the name of all the Ohio U.S. Representatives, and
I can help you with that,
but you
because most of them stink. So we're all over them.
I don't even doubt that, sadly, but
I know you're focused on convention of states, so
yeah, I am, and I used to be a little more federally focused, honestly, and I'm less so now. But we know names like Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi. We know those names. Those people have been around forever because they're super powerful. Like, that's why we know who they are. Like the average household, it's a household name, right? Because they're so powerful and they've been there so long. So a long-term limit, 24 years, could address those long-termers and move them on out. And the rest of them, okay. You like Jim Jordan? I get it. I do too. So he gets to stay 24 years. That's pretty decent. So I like that possibility. We could also send more than one amendment to, it might be a tall order to write 3 amendments, but have 3 different terms for a term limit and see what passes these legislatures. Right. And just see. I don't know why we couldn't write multiple ones. So that's my take on term limits. And
so what's the hurdle to getting this thing past 38 states?
The hurdle to getting it past 38. I mean, it would be the bipartisan nature of any of these amendments, but ideally we've engaged red and blue. We are a nonpartisan organization, and the effort is nonpartisan. And we've engaged the right people from all these states. All states get invited, not just the ones, we reach 34 states. The whole country gets invited. So everybody has representation, the blue and the red, and it's going to need to be to feel bipartisan for sure. That's going to be the hurdle.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot.
In the convention, the states get 1 vote, correct? Mm-hmm. As they're deciding on things. So one state may decide to send 3 people as their representatives. Are they called commissioners in our legislation? Okay.
Yeah, we would call them commissioners.
Yeah. And another could send 50, but they still only get 1 vote, right?
Correct. And you'd want an odd number. So 51, 49.
Yeah, 51. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
That shows you how inexperienced I am in politics.
No, that's okay. But I think there was an even number in one of the states, and they changed it because they had passed a legislation on that, and they went to, odd number. But yes, 50 would be an awful lot to work with. I think our recommendation in Ohio, or in general, just for COS, generally speaking, would be 3. But any state could really decide. Heck, if they want to do an even number, they could do that too. But that would make things a little awkward.
Yeah. What do you think the timeline is on something like this? Could we see results in a decade, or maybe our lifetimes, or is it a longer haul than that?
That's a good question. I did ponder that when I read your question last night. We've been at it 13 years. And I will tell you this, Mike Ferris, our co-founder, had worked on legislation that went all the way to the Supreme Court to keep homeschooling legal in all 50 states. And it took him 20 years. So when I hear things like that, he didn't lose heart in that effort, and he's not losing heart in this one. And as long as he hasn't lost heart, and he is the expert, I'm not. He's the constitutional expert who has litigated Article 5 issues in the Supreme Court level and other issues at the Supreme Court level too, I trust him. And if he's hanging in there and isn't giving up and knows it takes time and knows that you just stay the course, then I'm good with that. I'd love to see it happen faster. I had one person tell me, he said to me, I was, I must have been having a down moment, or I said, oh, it's taking so long. And he said, yeah, but it could happen all at once. Something could trigger, some messaging, something could trigger. And all of a sudden the rest of the states get on board and we do this. So one never knows. One never knows. I don't know what that would look like exactly. But
that's called irrational exuberance or irrational positivity.
It might be a little irrational, but I kind of liked it. I kind of liked it as well.
I
we
get
get it all done.
Yeah. I think if your motivations are pure and you're trying to do the right thing, whether it's someone, a proponent for this or an opponent to this, as long as you've got legitimate concerns and you're expressing them in a civil manner, I think that's a good process. Diana, are there any examples from other countries of systems that they use that are kind of like this, that can show how this kind of process can succeed or fail?
From other countries, I talked to my boss about this question, and she said, we both agreed, there is no other country that has a constitution anything like ours, which makes us, that's why we're so special. We are special here, and we are so lucky. And I don't know of one. The best I could do, which is sort of a partial answer, it's not a great answer, is that there are conventions all the time that go the way they're supposed to, and they don't go off the rails. And I've looked up several, and they happen all the time, and the whole world's involved, and they get the job done. But I don't know of another country that allows, like, this is the citizens kind of have a say in this. I'm just a citizen. I'm not elected, and I can be influential in this. And heck, if I wanted to run for office, I could, but I'm pretty happy doing what I'm doing here. And I do feel like I am getting my voice heard, for sure. I'm inserting it where I need to insert it. We walk around the state house, talk to legislators. What other country do they do that? I can't think of one.
Yeah, you will hear people talk about the Canadian Constitution or whatever. They are not the same as ours. You've made a good point there. And they do not give citizens the same amount, and at the sovereign states the same amount of power. It's more of a national federal government kind of system, and it makes us very, very unique. And I think I personally believe we need to stay that way. How do you respond to skeptics who say Congress or the courts can already fix this problem or these problems without a convention? And I think we've talked about it or hit on this a lot during this conversation. But what do you say to them when they say this can be fixed by typical legislation or executive orders or things like that?
It can be, except that they're not doing it, and the executive orders are temporary. And efforts of DOJ are temporary, frankly, and they're not going to be solidified or come to fruition at all unless there is some legislation. And are they going to do it? They have proven time again that they don't do it. I mean, what is the debt clock right now? Is it at, I don't know, 37
trillion. I mean, it was 36 last time I looked. It's probably 37 now.
It's so bad. I know, and I hate to look, and it's so aggravating. But they can fix certain things. They're just not doing it. And again, I'll tell you, this allows us to do the things that Congress won't do, which is exactly why George Mason asked to have it added into the Constitution, and it was voted unanimously into the Constitution for this moment in history. That's
a very important point that many people probably do not know about. This was universally embraced by everybody who was writing the Constitution. That it was a requirement, and there, I don't believe there were that many. There was a lot of discussion about a lot of other parts of the Constitution. This one was it seems like this one was a pretty no-brainer.
Yeah. Like, why didn't we think of that? Of course, they need a way around Congress, and they knew because they'd read about other civilizations. They knew a lot. They were so educated, and they knew that it was in the nature of government to grow. And this gave the states the opportunity. And they would have been worried about that, right? Because they were creating a federal government, and they would have all been very nervous about.
Yeah, that didn't exist prior.
Right.
Right.
It would have been very, very, oh my goodness. Like, think about Massachusetts and their footprint in the as one of the early states, and they want to give up any sovereignty to some federal bureaucracy or something. I don't think so. So yeah, they definitely would have. They did not argue, as I understand it, at all about adding the second clause of Article 5 to the Constitution. Furthermore, I want to say this: one of our founders was involved in the Tea Party. And he had said one of the reasons he shifted over to this effort is because he said we worked really hard to get certain people elected. And, like, some of the people you even mentioned in Ohio, maybe they're not, I don't know who you're talking about. But maybe their character is solid, but they get up there and the system is so broken that electing the right people isn't working. So apparently the Tea Party had made a lot of headway in getting people elected and nothing changed. So we can affect real change by doing this. And I mean, what else do we have? The lack of action is proof enough for me. Let's do this.
I agree.
They're never going to vote to reduce their own power. DOGE is going to need a little push. I think that's one of my hopes, is that in order to get that bureaucracy pared back permanently, to make DOGE worth our while. The Grace Commission during, in I think 1984, Ronald Reagan had created the Grace Commission, and they did the same thing DOGE is doing. Not quite the same. They weren't digging deep into the systems, I don't think, but they were looking for waste and making recommendations. It largely failed because they were able to grab some of that money back or save it by executive order, but Congress failed to act. I think Congress was not on Ronald Reagan's side at that time. It didn't happen. So if we want to really make things happen, there is an amendment, and we didn't talk too much about amendments. It's almost a show all itself, honestly, Mark. But one of the amendments, there is one that is like a 4-step plan. It's not our duty to throw an amendment out there at a convention. They need to be written in convention. But we obviously have ideas on what we would like those to look like and what could really work and what we need. And we do need one. And I do think this one could pass, especially because people are focused on DOGE and understanding a little bit more about what's going on there. But it's a paring back of the bureaucracy by way of, sunsetting these bureaucracies and having them approach, there's a committee, and they've got to go to the committee every 2, 3, 4 years, whatever term it is. And they have to be sort of, blessed to move on. And if they aren't doing their job, they're done. And
it's like they need to be recertified.
Yeah, exactly. It's well put, a recertification. And if they're not pulling their weight, then they have to go. And there is no system for that right now. Well, we put it in the Constitution. They'll have to do it. And at least if, we can, and if they don't do it, we have to pressure them and say, we've got an amendment here. It's your duty. So, yeah.
So we're coming up on an hour, and I wanted to try to keep this about an hour, even though I didn't tell you that.
I mean, I could do this all day.
Okay. So final question, and this is a good one, I think. What's the one thing you wish more people understood about a convention of states to ease their fears or spark their interest?
The one simple thing, this is just a meeting. We're asking for a meeting. It happens to be on certain topics, as we've discussed, but it is just a meeting. Amendments can be proposed, and I read Article 5. They can be proposed. They cannot, nothing else happens to them unless they get voted out of that meeting and they get offered up to the states. That's what I wish people understood. And there is a lot of negativity out there. We have opposition. There's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of fear. And I do wish people understood that that's all it is. Per Article 5, that's what it is. The doomsday fairy tales do not hold water. And this Article 5, it's operating within the framework of the Constitution, not outside of it. It's not revolutionary. It's within the framework. And there's no language that does anything but allow us to propose in a convention. That's it. That's it. Either they write them at Congress, somewhere in DC, in some room on their own, whatever that looks like, or we set up as a state convention with people that the legislators deem worthy, and we write some amendments. And I don't see the danger in that. There's no danger in that. How is that dangerous? I trust the state folks more than I would Washington, D.C. I do. We're $37 trillion in debt. Like, the fiscal cliff is not a pleasant place to be.
Yeah.
It is not a good thing. We are in trouble, and there's a lot of reasons why, but we need to take steps to address it. And Article 5 Convention of the States can do that.
Great. So Diana, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for the preparation that I knew you put into it. Thank you for being with me today. We will put all the references that you've talked about in our show notes so people can do as much or as little homework on the topic that they want to do. I'm going to encourage people to do a lot of research on the topic.
Yeah, let's cut it off there. Boy, Diana did a great job on that, didn't she?
Fantastic job. She brought up some very excellent points. To me, you break it down really simply. I mean, how often do you sit in your chair at night with the television on? And I know maybe not enough people are doing it, but how often do you sit in your chair and look at these members of Congress and you wonder to some of them, how did you get elected? and some of the nonsense that these people fight over day in and day out, and nothing comes to the table that is for the American people. You can see the self-servants and everything they do. So why wouldn't you be for something that said, you know what, Congress, you have to take a back seat here. We're gonna have this meeting, and we're going to discuss some things that we would like as the American people to see get done, and we the people are going to do this. And then those amendments come forth, and then you still have to get 38 states to turn around and say, yeah, let's vote this in. Yeah. It's not an easy process, which makes it which makes it sometimes frustrating, but it is the way that our country is unique in the world. And I just, I don't understand how some of these people can be so negative when all you're trying to do is say, hey, look, there's a lot wrong there, and we have more power to correct it than we think.
Yeah. I tell you, I've been involved in Convention of States for, it's got to be over 10 years. They had to figure it out, 10, 11 years, something like that. Yeah. And it's good to hear Diana hit on these topics again and again, because we tend to, I tend to forget some of them.
Yeah.
But just when you stop and think about the national debt, it is so true that Washington D.C. can't correct this. They can't address this.
It's an addiction. It's an addiction. And Dale, I know both of us are at the points in our lives where, and I think of my sons and granddaughters, but this is not something that I mean, just realistically, you have to stop and think, who wants to see this balloon up over $40 trillion? This will get passed down to so many generations. They're going to be strapped with this fiscal just behemoth for through their lifetime, and it's not something that is fair to pass along to these people. No. We need to fix this now. We really do.
And we're going to have to do it.
Yeah,
the people are going to have to do this. They can't do it. Washington D.C. can't.
No, because they're addicted. When it comes to money, we all know the root of that, and these people, it's when they have such access. And I think we should spend more time, maybe bring up some, maybe we need to spend a show on this and just look at the enormous amount of money these people go out of service with, or if they ever go out, a lot of them die with it, but go into it with, I think, and I don't want to pick on AOC, but look, here's a bartender living on $174,000 a year, and right now she's worth over a couple of $1 million. How does that happen?
I don't know.
I wish we all had that kind of money-making tree in our backyard.
Okay.
It's. I know. I can get lathered up now, so I think I'll.
All right, let's start wrapping up here tonight.
Yep.
Let's tell everybody what we got coming up next on June 9th, our next COS today. We got part 3, the final part of media bias that we did tonight. And we got some other things going on, but that'll be the main thing for the next COS today on June 9th.
Mm-hmm.
Then the following week, now this ought to be very interesting. Our Brett Sturley, our contributor, Brett Sturley, who's COS State Director for Missouri, he's agreed to tackle anti-Semitism, and
I think we're going to spend a lot more time on that than we think. I mean, if you just look at the news and what happened in Colorado this week, I think
so much going on,
got a big problem.
And the history involved. I don't know how deep or how far he's going to go on this, but this could be a multi-part report on anti-Semitism. And then coming up the following week is the next roundtable on June 23rd. And we've decided to do part 2 of Trump restoring common sense. The roundtable that we did on May 26th was actually part 1 of this. So we're going to do part 2 on June 23rd. And that ought to be very interesting too. So, and folks, just as a reminder to everyone, anyone that viewing tonight that has a question or a comment to make about our broadcast, send us an email to raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. That's raiseyourvoicecos@gmail.com. Well, let's take a look at our weekly segment from John Ackerman on COS basics, and then we'll come back and say goodnight to everyone and close out with Maringo Mike. So let's see what John has for us in COS basics.
That's a good plan.
John Ackerman for Convention of States, Indiana, continuing with COS Basics number 18, and continuing to bust myths. This next myth is that an Article 5 convention is a constitutional convention. In other words, a con. Oh, they like to say that. The radical left, John Birch Society, George Soros and company, they love to say con. But this is no con. This is an amendments convention. You see, it is simply wrong to imply that an Article 5 convention held today would be anything like the 1787 Philadelphia Convention that produced the United States Constitution. The states that gathered then had individual supreme political powers. They were sovereign states. They were not bound to the Articles of Confederation procedures or guidelines for proposing amendments. Today, an Article 5 convention has limits. The limits are rooted in Article 5 of our Constitution. An Article 5 convention is limited to only proposing amendments to the existing Constitution. It says so right in there. Read it sometime. And so the myth that an Article 5 convention is a con, a constitutional convention, busted.
Didn't take long to bust that one, I don't think, dude.
No, it sure didn't. That's kind of a good follow up on Diana's interview
for sure
on the convention. All right, Ken, let's. That's pretty much a wrap for this evening. we're going to let Maringo Mike say goodnight to everyone. And Ken, thank you for everything. And we'll be back with you again next Monday evening for COS Today, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So hope you can join us at that time. Did we have any comments or questions we should from any viewers tonight, Ken?
Boy, Gary, just reiterated. I'll go ahead and put his up because Gary was faithful in putting something in our chat tonight. So he just says that, you know, the mainstream media goal to divide Americans against each other. Yeah, plenty of that. So yeah, he agreed.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. All right, Ken, have a good evening and good night, everyone. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. And let me get Maringo Mike up here. All right.
Maringo Mike here with a reminder that our work to raise the bar on making our federal government accountable to the people is only halfway done. We need to grow our grassroots army of citizens every day to fulfill the vision of our forefathers and keep our land free and prosperous. So, if you have never signed the petition to show your support, use that QR code and do that now. While you're there, why not kick it up a notch and volunteer for many of the positions available where your talents can make a difference as we march into a new year. Thank you, and God bless.